The St. John's International Women's Film Festival is based in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. We respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has been lost forever and can never be recovered. We also acknowledge the island of Uktamguk, Newfoundland, as the unceded, traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq. We acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Nitassinan, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunatuavut. We recognize all First Peoples who were here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First People have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
To start, I'd love to hear about the genesis of your film. So why this specific story for you at this specific time? Small question to start.
Yeah, I actually wrote the script for Stay the Night 11 years ago. So I just quit my day job and I was gonna I'm gonna be a filmmaker. I'm gonna do this full time. And I moved to LA for 3 months. I gave myself 3 months, not to make it, just to be creative, just to write. And my goal was to write 1 page. It was a very small goal, so it was actually doable. But my second night in LA, I met up with a friend of a friend, and she told me a really great celebrity story, and I always love a good celebrity story, about a young woman who was approached by a very famous person, and it was obvious that it was going to be it could be a one night stand. And I love that kind of idea and concept, high concept. And this girl, this woman apparently asked herself, can I be that girl? Can I be the girl who has a one night stand with a famous person? She's like, I can't be that girl. And then she's like, no, I can be that girl. And I just like that question. Can I be that girl? And who was that girl? Who was that guy? And so I kind of just sort of delved into that and thought about that. And I went to a cafe here in LA, where I just happen to be on vacation right now. And I wrote the script in a few weeks, and then tried to get it made and put it in a drawer for 6 years. And then 2018 took it out again, and we decided to make it.
I like that question of, can I be that girl? That's good. Yeah. And how about you, Tara?
I had just quit my job and turned 40. So it was it's kind of a generic midlife crisis situation. And I didn't,
Is it?
well, maybe not in this country. We end up being a bit older because it takes a lot longer. It's a lot harder. And the Atlantic Filmmakers Cooperative here in town had this workshop called Writing Small. And its goal was to help people write scripts specifically to apply for Talent to Watch, which is the micro-budget program at Telefilm. And so because I had all this free time, and as a journalist, I need structure and deadlines, I got accepted into the workshop, and I just wrote Compulsus kind of in stages from November to January, and then got a producer and applied to Talent to Watch in March. And of course, the pandemic knocked all the deadlines off, but we found out we got it in July of 2020. And where it comes from is just, I often open with ever heard of the patriarchy? Just the idea, it's about a lesbian vigilante who beats up abusive hipster men at night, specifically hipster men, the kind of guys, Win Butler being a great example. He's the king of those guys, guys who publicly forward facing are allies, and they give back to the community, and in private are total shitbags. So and then are thus able to very easily move through their community, causing harm and never really answering for it. So yeah, it was very easy for it to kind of fall out after a lifetime of kind of living through it.
Right. Yeah. So there's a Talent to Watch. I was wondering if it was my first film was a Talent to Watch.
Amazing. There's only 6 people in it, so that's probably how you could guess.
Yeah, I just had few too. It works well. It keeps scope small. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess then once you've decided on the story, I'm interested in what the process of the kind of pre-official development looked like, when it was just you and the idea, like maybe you pitched producers, or maybe you applied for development funding for your writing, or like what that kind of very early stage looks like. I feel like that kind of doesn't get talked about as much.
Talent to Watch is sort of a different process than, because it doesn't involve trying to get people to buy in. It does involve like Telefilm buying the idea, but it's not like, oh, we're trying to get funding and co-pros and all that stuff. It's like it has a goal, and you apply to a debt. So really, I just needed to get a first draft script. And the bizarre thing about Talent to Watch, I think this is public information, you have to apply with a script. They do not read them.
Yeah.
They don't, which is messed up. Like, I get the idea of like, okay, if someone's asking us for 6 figures, I would like to see evidence that they have a script. Like, that's what it's for.
Yeah.
But they don't, but it doesn't determine whether you get it or not. So yeah, I wrote it, and we submitted it. It's a very kind of simple process.
Nice.
In a way that I think now that we're trying to make a second one, and we're like, how do we do it? I don't know. It's like, I think that's a lot harder. It's like going through the actual system, where Talent to Watch is sort of this outsider emerging program. The rest of the film industry is over here, and I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, and in Talent to Watch, I think too, part of their MO is that they want it to be really like writer director driven, like to support a specific voice, and they're happy if people are doing something riskier, edgier, more abstract. So I mean, that's definitely not always the case when you go the more traditional route.
Yeah.
So it's really nice in a way.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, but then you kind of go, how many Talent to Watch directors make second films? Like, I would love to see stats on that, because I don't know. Because in the early years, I think the first year was 50, and then it was 25, and now I think they only did 9 in our year, but they're back to 25.
Oh, are they? Yeah, there was 10 in mine, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a lot of movies.
It's a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Well, for me, like I said, I wrote the script 11 years ago, and then, tried to make it. So I teamed up with a producer, an emerging producer, and we sought out sort of development funding, also trying to get an executive producer on board that had, access to Telefilm, and could get some development funding for it, but couldn't get an EP on board, couldn't get any more significant production financing for it, even though it was a simple story. It's a one night stand that turns into something more meaningful. It's sort of a two-hander for the most part, and it was just sort of frustrating. So just to, I'd done 3 shorts, and trying to make your first feature, and couldn't get it done, and so I kind of pivoted to television to get to try to keep directing. And television isn't, I'm very open about it. It's like, it's not my first choice. I love movies. I want to make movies. But I've really have learned a lot, and learned to love television, actually directing television. But a few years ago, my agent, who's sort of my biggest fan, was like, saw that I was sort of bit, wanting to make a movie, and he's like, let's make that movie. And so we applied to the Telefilm Regional Fund, and we got half our financing from that, and then the other half was from my agent, from my producer.
Wow,
and we'd have a distributor on board. It was, it's a micro budget, and we just kind of wanted to make it, didn't want to wait. And so that was 2018 we got Telefilm, and then 2019 we shot the first 15 days of our film, and then proceeded to shoot every year until 2022 when we released it.
Really?
Yeah.
What were you shooting after the fact?
So our original production length was 15 days. And then when we edited, it was a hard shoot. It was winter, night shoots, emerging greenish crew. We reshot 2 of our days within our 15 days. And then, in the edit, like we needed some pickups, we needed to do some reshoots. The opening wasn't working. So we slated that for March 2020, and we got 3 out of our 4 days in, and then the 4th day got punted because it was March 2020. We all know what happened then because of COVID and because of actor availability and whatever. We had to wait till March 2021 to get that last day in, which was our opening scenes that started the movie. So we really needed them. And then March 2022, we premiered at South by Southwest and finally. So it was every March. We kind of reconvene every March for the past 4 times to do this movie. But yeah.
Congrats on premiering at South by Southwest. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that really saved us. I think it was like we didn't expect to, it's a small Canadian film, really intimate, and you know how it is, you guys, like just to get into a festival, but then to have people see it. And South by was a great platform, and we're really honored that they saw our film and then accepted us. So
amazing.
Yeah.
And so you had kind of done a bunch of TV directing and then came to your feature, which is, often the other way around, but it's great to be able to practice as a director, just the craft through TV directing. So what do you think you learned from TV directing that helped you then in your feature?
Well, it's, making a feature takes so long, as you both know. It takes forever. And as a director, like a director should be directing. And when you're doing just features, you're not always directing. You're writing, you're developing, you're pitching, you're doing all the, like, not directing. So TV just gives you so many opportunities to, like, work with bigger budgets, bigger than small Canadian micro budget films, at least. Mm-hmm. And then with great crews and casts and different scopes and telling different stories. So you get to exercise different muscles, and it's not stuff that you've necessarily written to. So different tone, different, dynamics. And so I've been very lucky and fortunate to be able to break into TV like that. And it's, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I know. I really want to do some TV directing too. I mean, for that reason, and also, the money doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
So shall we move on to casting?
Sure.
Great performances in both your films. Tara, the performances by Leslie and Kathleen are so strong in your film, and so much hinges on their chemistry. Can you tell me a bit about casting them?
Yeah, well, we were in between COVID lockdowns in the casting process, so it was all over Zoom. And I'd never done it before. Like any short I've made, I've just been like emailed actors I like and go, "Do you want to be in a movie?" And they always say yes. So we cast Leslie first, who plays Wally, and she is living in Toronto, but she's from Halifax. So she's someone whose work I was familiar with on stage, but I hadn't seen her in too many films. And then instead of calling actors back specifically for Lou, we had them screen test with Leslie, because my theory was that if they could make me believe that they were into each other over Zoom, that they would probably get along really well in real life, which is what happened. So they made it crackle on screen, and then we had them on set for our shoot was also 15 days, no added days.
15.
No budget.
Yeah.
15 was tough, and all of our actors, they're all in the same friend group, which is a very Halifax thing. It's not why we cast them all, but it kind of looks like we just like plucked this group of people. And so the nice thing is they all kind of were familiar with each other already, and we needed Leslie and Kat and Kumbi to all kind of be old buds, and it also helped Leslie that Jimmy, who plays the man, one actor plays all the men, and like they had to do stunts together, and that's someone she's known since she was a teenager, so she's trusted him, and so all these relationships came kind of ready-made, baked in, which was really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's very handy. And so did you get to do any work with them beforehand? Like, did you get to rehearse or do any script work or anything?
We got 8 hours on Zoom. Thanks, ACTRA. And I was allowed to split it up however I wanted. So we did a full cast read, and then just did a handful of scenes. So no, we really didn't. It was, and the nice thing about them all coming from the theater is that they're good at memorization. So like they showed up knowing their shit. So there was never any concern about drop lines or not knowing where the story was or anything like that. So yeah, they were all like wonderful to work with.
Yeah, well, them knowing each other is a really big asset, especially with no rehearsal or anything.
Definitely.
Yeah. And Renuka, you had worked with Andrea before, right? Did you have her in mind when you were writing the script, or how did you decide on
Not
her?
at all. Not at all. And even when we were casting, we had a casting director go out and did a call and had auditions and people sent in tapes and came and read for it and everything. And I saw when you got the list of who taped for it, I saw Andrea Bang. I'm like, oh my God, that's so nice of Andrea. Like, she's so wrong for this role. That is so nice that she, like, because we worked together on Kim's for a bunch of seasons before that. And then I watched her tape and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Of course, she is great. She's so perfect for it. She's amazing. I know how amazing she is, having worked with her and what she can bring. And Kim's was a great fun show, but it didn't show half of what her range is. And so Andrea once was like, okay, yeah, her, just had to ask her and then hope that she would say yes, was available. And then for the role of Carter, I thought that would be a harder role to cast just because there's a bunch of cliches. Got to be like this good looking hockey dude, whatever, but had to also show this vulnerability. And it's interesting, a lot of the actors who taped and auditioned didn't show that vulnerability. They showed the jock side, the sporty, stronger male side. And Joe, who eventually played Carter, his audition was all about being vulnerable. And so that was easy. And then found out later that he's French Canadian originally. And when he was a kid, he had to choose between acting and hockey. And he chose acting, but he's a huge hockey, like he plays hockey. So I rewrote some of our ice skating stuff for him.
I was gonna ask, he really looked like he knew what he was doing out there.
Yeah.
And they had great chemistry, and like you said, Andrea was very sincere, her performance, I felt. Yeah.
And unlike Tara, like none of my cast knew each other. We have no rehearsal. They're all from Joe was in the States, Andrea was in Vancouver, we had some other cast in Toronto, so no one. It was on the day before we started shooting. I had them come. We did like Andrea and Joe. We had a little reading, but I talked to them all individually beforehand a lot. But that all that chemistry had to be developed on set in those 15 days.
Wow.
Yeah. But I guess that kind of, aligns with the story a bit, because they meet and, it all happens over such a short period of time. So the chemistry builds.
True.
I'm sure you didn't get to shoot in order, but.
No. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so once you have your cast and your funding and you're kind of getting amped up for production, this being your first features, what's playing on your mind? Like, what are you stressed about, worried about, excited about? How are you preparing, like, yourself as a human and for the production? Do you want to start, Renuka?
Well, I'm trying to think back to that first time when it was really just the time. I was directing television a lot, and we had 3 weeks of prep, and I was still working on the script because the script changed from Carter Stone being an actor to being a hockey player. So that was a month before we started prep. I changed that.
Oh wow.
So yeah, and so I was always working the script. I was always sort of obsessed and concerned about the script.
Mhm.
And it was just really a race to get to the start of the shoot. And then you're just trying to survive, really, because it's micro budget, you know. There's
Yeah,
so many, you're
yeah,
wearing so many hats. Like my
yeah.
apartment was our production office and our holding for our background.
Wow.
It was every all hands on deck. And it was just me, Brian, and Glenn, my producers. That was it. Like, you know, when we had our, you know, production stuff, but it wasn't a big team. It was us just sort of problem solving and using our resources. And, you know, we lost our one of our main locations on our tech scout. Then we're already shooting, like we had to find this like big hotel penthouse suite. So weekends, evenings, you're scouting still, and we're shooting nights. That was hard.
Yeah,
So
winter
trying to like
nights.
sleep, winter
Yeah,
nights. Yeah. So,
yeah,
you know, your health suffers and you
yeah.
only catch up and start eating properly again, like 2 weeks
Part of the
afterwards when
nervous
you've
system.
recovered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, you're in fight or flight mode for so much of it. It's just like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, not sustainable.
Yeah.
I was stressed out all the time. My DP, Nicole Cecile Holland, is my next door neighbor. Like
Oh,
very
nice.
classic Halifax. So, and she was sort of this nighthawk existence. So she'd be like at 11 p.m. or something. She'd be like, "Do you want to meet about the movie?" And I'm like, "Okay." like it's not that big of a deal. So we were, you know, kind of ping ponging to each other's houses and you know, making our little shot lists and wandering around the neighborhood, finding locations to shoot, because all of the attacks happen outside at night, which I would never do again. So like shooting outside, even if you've got street permits, you have permits to be on the street. You can't stop anybody from wandering through or yelling at you. So, you know, we had to deal with stuff like that. It was spring in Halifax, so there's a snowstorm on day 2, and then on day 15 it was 17 degrees. So it was like that kind of vibe. That's why there's this in the opening scene, there's this like dirty pile of snow on the ground that I'm so mad about. Like it's so gross. I wish I wasn't there. But that's where we were in the weather. So yeah, my thing was coming out of a pandemic, living alone, and then suddenly I'm hiring people. Like, I mean, my producer's doing it, but I'm approving them all. And I'm hiring people who all have many, many, many questions, and then I have to know the answer and sound
Mhm.
like I know what I'm talking about. And just sort of like dealing with all the departments, and then showing up on set with 20 people, which again is not a lot of people, but is a lot of people for me. It's like, I don't know any of you, and I'm the boss of you. It's just sort of like it's a lot. It's very overwhelming. It's constant. It's just coming at you all the time, and some of it's really fun, and some of it's boring and mid work, and some of it's awesome. And to go back to your casting question, like I was like, when do I get to talk to the actors? Like, that's my favorite part. And like, when do we get to the fireworks factory of shooting the movie with the actors? And it's the last thing that happens. But like all the prep, I know a lot of people really love prep. I'm like medium on it.
Mhm.
I know it's important. I know we need to do it, but I wish I could go from script to shooting and then someone else could do all the middle stuff.
Yeah.
Would be
Well, it's
ideal.
a bit of a shock to the system when you're writing your own projects and you just spend so much time alone, you know, doing your little writing and
Yeah.
drinking your little coffees, and all of a sudden you're like surrounded by so many people, and like you said, all the questions, and it can be a little bit intense
Totally.
sometimes.
I got a text from a friend of mine who had been in background like during the shoot. And she said, "What are you shooting today?" And it was Good Friday. And I said, "I'm shooting a sex scene in a car in the middle of the night, and I already wish I was dead." And she said,
Yeah.
"Well, you wrote it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I wrote it when I thought it was never gonna happen."
Yep.
So, you know, you live and you learn.
Yes, I understand. I understand that very well. Yeah, I had in my first feature too, there's some intimate scenes, and
Mhm.
yeah, those were, you know, because you know you want to be you want to create a safe space and everyone to feel comfortable, and you want it to look good and do the thing that it's supposed to do. and look like you're calm while inside you're kind of panicking.
Yeah,
I'm projecting.
No, it's a very tough thing to do. And part of me is like, well, do I need to have it at all? But because, you know, ours is like a queer story, and there's so many like queer love stories are either like oversexed, like Blue is the Warmest Color, or having like nothing. They're like the chaste, like Portrait of a Lady on Fire or something, where it's all longing and looking. And I was like, no, this is contemporary. You have to show them making out at least.
Yeah. And yeah, that just goes with the whole atmosphere of charged energy in the film, you know. How are you working like with your cinematographer? Are you going by a shot list? What's your kind of visual approach to making the film, and what does that look like?
I wanted to work with Nicole because she knows obscure Russian and European things I've never heard of, and she's very stylistic. And I knew she would make the movie look amazing, which she did. And I remember one day her saying, "We need to talk about color." And I was like, why? I don't understand. Like, doesn't the movie just look like a movie? No. And and we get compliments on the color in the movie constantly. And that was all her. She's just like, here's vibrant. What I'm thinking. Yeah. And I just go, yeah, looks great to me. So yeah, we kind of sat together and made a really, really, really long shot list. And then, you know, kind of figured out on the day what could or couldn't stay. But I think we lost 2 shots in the whole movie. So that's pretty good.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's very
We were very efficiently scheduled.
Yeah. And so are you kind of, as you're setting up the scene, and blocking with the actors, are you kind of telling them, you know, this is your mark and your mark, or are you kind of letting them run through the scene, find where they go, more freestyle or more of a formal kind of set approach?
Yeah, I think more freestyle. We didn't do too many marks unless it was like really integral, like if they were coming in and needing to stop somewhere. But generally, yeah, it was a bit more free form, which I like. Like, I think it's nice if you can take away the parameters that do make it feel formal and kind of like a very mechanical process, which it is. It's a technical process as well as an artistic process. But anytime you can up the art, I think that's nice.
Up the art. Agreed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so okay. Well, I love prep. So I'm one of those people who like loves prep and preps to death. And over the years, you know, I'd collected like 600 images about this movie just off, you know, Tumblr, and you know, I'm a movie buff, so I reference a lot of things as well. And so I remember in our prep with my DP Connor, we went through every one of those images, and I would say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what I like about this, the framing here, the color here, this, you know, that was just like a nice way to like just get on the same page about the feel of the film. But I do shot list. I do, but I also throw it away when you get on set, and I want to see what the actors bring to it. And there's, you know, there's ideas of what you want the shot to be and how to tell the story. So I love shot design and how that can inform your themes and your character and everything. And one of the major, I guess, visual themes I had was sort of private versus public spaces. So having very private moments and public spaces. So that's why there's like views, obsession with the view all the time, an intimate scene with like a big view of the city behind them. So sort of having those sort of themes, and then we went to our locations to see how we could bring those things out was sort of my kind of MO. Yeah.
Yeah, and that translated perfectly in your film. I really like that private versus public spaces. I'm working on a film right now that kind of has a similar theme. So thank you.
And locations was really important. Like that was, I think it was like we get our actors, but I was like, location manager. Who is our location manager? Because for our film, it's like set over there, you know, downtown Toronto, in some really distinct places, and I wanted we don't have a lot of money, so let's put it all into like, let's get great locations, or try to at least, and then let that sing. So
Yeah.
We did not have a location manager.
No.
Me and my producer were wandering around and going, what do we think about this bar? I found the apartment on Airbnb, like, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Pretty low budget.
Yeah, I know. But I found locations to be one of the most stressful things in prep when I was making my film, because it took way longer than I wanted. I was just afraid of compromising, but then, it comes to a point where you have to make a decision because so many things filter into the location. So this time around, I'm hoping to find my locations like a lot ahead, but we'll see.
My next film has 2 locations, because I was like, no, we are not running around outside anymore. Every location move is a pain in the ass. We know this. It just eats up so much time and transporting on the gear and the people and stuff. And it's hard on people to set things up and tear it down a bunch of times a day. So it's going to be a house and a bar. That's it.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds like a very kind environment.
It's going to be fun. Should we all live in the house? Probably not, but we might.
I have a bar upstairs, a house downstairs, vice versa.
There you go.
Tara, I'm really interested in the tone of your film. Hopefully this will be a compliment, but to me, it kept reminding me tonally of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in some ways.
Leslie will be so happy you said that.
Because, it has, really intense scenes and violence, but the dialogue has this kind of levity to it, and it's very funny. And controlling the tone in that kind of a story is very important. So can you tell me a little bit about the tone of your film?
I can, and it's funny, when we premiered it Inside Out, they said, this reminds me of film noir and superhero movies, and I was like, no. It is a weird tone, because it's 2 halves. It's a love story and a hate story, really. Like it's romance and vengeance. So yeah, I wanted the night scenes. This is going to be a weird reference, but I wanted the night scenes to look like Before Sunrise, which is a movie about people talking at night. I just love Linklater so much. Like Linklater and Hollow Center, those are my touchstone filmmakers, and they aren't visual stylists. I think Linklater does a lot of cool experimentation, but mostly they're character driven and relationship driven. So that sort of was my thing. And then the tone, again, it sort of just emerged from Nicole's kind of color palette, and yeah, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where if you ask me how I did it, which you just did, I kind of don't know. It's like we shot it and it worked out. But people compare us the most to Death Wish, which I think is really, it's Charles Bronson. It's like an old revenge movie. So and the Batman and like all these sort of male revenge thrillers, because it's
right.
It's not normal to see a woman in this kind of part. So we get a lot of, so that's how we ended up in Fantasia and City Underground Film Festival and stuff, because people think we're a genre film. So your question about tone, like I just feel like people say a lot of things about the tone. I don't really know. I just wanted something intense but not dark, and also beautiful and romantic with the love story.
Yeah, I do understand that comparison, because it has the sort of heightened style with the colors, and then sometimes the score has that kind of intensity too. But I also found myself laughing a lot when watching it, which felt good.
That's good. You go.
No, I was just going to say, I kept asking myself what how I would be experiencing the movie if Wally was a man who was chasing down these men like on behalf of women, you know, and like how that would, because sometimes, you know, you do find yourself recoiling from the violence and kind of her lack of remorse. But and then it's kind of interesting thought experiment to think about you know, how you would feel if it was a man instead of a woman.
Yeah, you'd think it was great, probably. Not you personally, the royal
but it's easier to accept somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, people laugh in weird spots too. They laughed in really weird places in Montreal. So I was like, is this a French thing? And then we just screened it at home at the Atlantic Film Festival. And there was a scene that I feel is very serious that people also had laughed at in Montreal, that they like lost their minds here. So I'm like, maybe I don't get it. I don't know. I don't know. It's not supposed to be funny. But what can you do?
I know, it just becomes its own thing. Yeah. So Renuka, there's at the beginning of your film, there's a sort of a call to action when I'm going to quote you to you. When the boss says to Grace, for the client to open up, you also have to open yourself up. We're not going to hire you to make that change. You need to make that change first. And I feel like that, you know, she kind of sets off from there with that internalized. Could you maybe give us some insight into that dialogue and what it means to the story?
Yeah, so that's basically the first scene of the film. Grace checks in with her boss about, did I get this promotion? And that's what her boss tells her. She didn't get it because of those reasons. Believe it or not, that was not the original opening. I did not write that opening until October 2021.
Wow.
Because our original opening just didn't set up the movie. It didn't give her that, you know, what does she want? Why now? What if she doesn't get it? It didn't put the gas in the tank for the script to keep fueling itself and driving off. And so wrapped my brain about what that scene was, because it wasn't setting up the movie, and the film wasn't working because we didn't have that opening. And we actually didn't even have the opening of Carter being sent down explicitly. So I wrote that first, and then was trying to figure out what Grace's opening scene was, which is a really tricky part because she's more of an internal character. She's the private, whereas Carter's the public. And it's hard to express what does she want, because her kind of problem in the film isn't really as is sort of a surprise, not a surprise, but it's so internal, and it's not something that she would readily give up at the beginning of the movie. So it was tricky. And but I had dinner with some friends of mine, and they'd seen a cut of the film. We were brainstorming, what is this opening scene? What is it? And then one of my friends, Pinder, she's like, what if it's a performance review? I was like, that's it. It's something like that. And it was so obvious. I knew it was going to be obvious once we got it, but it was so obvious because it mirrors what Carter's. He didn't get this. He got sent down. He didn't get promoted or whatever. She same thing. And you want to really align those two characters so that they're so like odd for each other, but there's something in their journey and that night and that sets them off that you want to bring aligned. And so, so once that's what it was very easy to write that.
I would never have guessed that hadn't been the beginning all along.
I know,
because it's just so perfect there. It makes all the sense in the world.
One thing I'd say for, you're making your first feature, it's probably going to be a micro budget, very small budget, as mine was. It's micro budget. Reshoots, don't budget that into your movie, because reshoots saved our film. They saved our film. Doing pickups and reshoots, it helped our film. Like it wouldn't be where it is today at all. We went to South by and we got distribution, Canada, US, world, just from that. And I know that we wouldn't have, if we didn't have our reshoots those 4 days and had the time, we had 2 years in between when we first shot and the last day that we shot. That saved us. The pandemic in a way saved us, so Yeah.
And so was it in editing? Were you editing when you discovered that these certain things weren't working, or did you know, like when you were filming it or as soon as you had finished, that you were going to have to go back and?
Yeah, it's our editor was editing as we were shooting, even that
Oh,
first
nice.
time.
Nice.
But you're just trying to get through it, and it was just, you think it on the script, on the page, and obviously the first scene when you're writing a script, you work that one to death. Like that's the one where when you go back to page one, you're always reading that. So that our original opening was like, this is great, this is fine, it's setting up everything, all these things, what her thing is, but it didn't. Like you don't, and sometimes you can't see it until it's on the screen in front of you, and you're in the edit suite, But then having producers who didn't give up on the film, were so encouraging, and were like, let's put in some more money, let's do these reshoots. It just really helped.
Yeah, that makes such a difference.
Yeah.
We didn't do reshoots, but we moved the opening scene deeper into the movie. Because it now opens with a poem, but those were in the script really late. They were always placeholders because I didn't write them. So until we saw it, like it opened with all the girls like talking about shitty men, and it just like wasn't quite right to like dump all these people on the movie when it's Wally's movie. And then just one day, the editor and I had we texted. I was like, why isn't the poem opening the movie? So it is good to kind of let go of your opening vision, because you're right, that opening scene, you do spend the most time on it, because it's also the one that people read the most and decide whether they're going to continue reading.
Yeah.
But saying that works perfectly as your opening, and then it mirrors nicely with the last scene too, which I love that last scene of this is the groundbreaking, which a very risky move, because that can go either way with having
down the
characters
barrel,
like right to the and
well, that was a rewrite, so it was a different ending. It's everyone will love this story. It's so at the end, she's supposed to come out of this house, and the street's supposed to be filled with women, and the revolution has started. That was always the ending, always, which I remind my producer. And maybe on day 9, we were shooting all the last stuff on the last day, which never happens. But maybe on day 9, I was like, "Hey, Nicole, are we gonna start gathering people for the revolution?" And she said, "Oh, well, we've got all the actors coming back." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's 5 people. That's not a revolution." And so we kind of talked around it. We didn't get in a fight. It was the closest we came to like being mad at each other. And she's like, "Let me think about it." And then the DP said, "I can't shoot the revolution the way we talked, because it involved a steady cam. You can't just pick up a steady cam and go out and do it. It's a whole training process. There's a lot involved." So I was sitting there on Monday with this shoot coming up on Thursday, while they were setting up another shot, rewriting the ending to change it, to bring all the characters. Some of them had left the movie at that point, but we brought them all back and did this sort of surrealist thing. And you're right, I didn't know if it would work. And there's like stuff of them chanting in the street that we caught. Like it didn't all work, but I think the way it turned out was probably better in the end.
I found it to be very powerful, and their performances to be very believable. Yeah. So we're almost out of time, but just to finish, how does it feel to have your films out in the world now and people to be seeing them?
Amazing, because that's why we make movies, so people can see them. And it's not your movie anymore. It's up for interpretation, and people connect to it. And that's the best part. Honestly, that's the best part.
I was a film critic for 15 years, so it's very hard for me to read reviews from like 2 sides, like the filmmaker side and also the where are the editors side.
Yes.
So I always have to like read it and then come back to it and be like, okay, you've absorbed it, now read it with like a normal person's eyes, just relax. But it's really, really fun, and it's validating. You're like, because you work in the dark by yourself for so long, and then work with these amazing teams, and then you're like, well, see you on the other side. And you don't get to kind of in Canada, don't get to control that other side. You're like, I'll just apply for festivals and see what works out.
Yeah.
And I'll spend all winter getting rejected. I'm sure it's fine. So it's like, yeah, once you finally get one thing and one audience, you're like, oh, it's real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much, and congratulations on hopefully the first of many features.
We hope.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of you.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye.